Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Kap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 17 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. We give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout Week 3 and the rest of the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Kap. Nick, we're recording a little bit early this week since I'll be on vacation. Wanted to get this episode out to you guys for sure before the weekend. So we're recording on Tuesday, September 17th. Latest news of the day is that Kareem Hunt is signing with the Kansas City Chiefs. Tua Tagovailoa is on the IR. Big fantasy news coming out this Tuesday. And we're kind of in mid-season form with all these injuries and shifting places around the league. We're in mid-season form at this point.
Yeah, man. Listen, injuries are part of the game. I got some leagues where I'm lucky and got fortunate. I got one league where I have between T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp, and Deebo Samuel. I'm struggling to look at receivers. 3 receiver league, 2 flexes. I got to spend my money on the waiver wire. So hopefully you checked out Tuesday's show and got those big hitters. But yeah, it's a big week.
Yeah. I saw a team on Twitter. Somebody had it was like the all injury team. It was like AJ Brown. Yeah. And the thing is like as much as it's like a joke, it's like that's a legitimate team that was probably drafted and could have been drafted a bunch of times. I mean, if you look at the injured players and their ADPs, it's where they kind of fell. So but this is why we're here. It's our Thursday show. We're going to give you our all boom and all bust teams for Week 3 to help you set those lineups and to help you, figure out those flex decisions. Maybe give you a boost of confidence in some guys you might be starting, or maybe to steer you away from some players that we don't want you starting. I gave you guys the nugget last week. Bench Jamar Chase. I don't have the number in front of me as to what he scored, but I think he only had 2 receptions for 20 yards or something like that. I think he scored less than double-digit fantasy points. So if Nick has any take, he's more than welcome to shout it from the heavens. So anyway, all boom, all bust today, followed by a second segment that we're going to do every week. We're going to give you one player that we think that's on the waiver wire in most of your leagues you could pick up right now and could potentially be a league winner. Now, this is going to be a deep sleeper. You might want to drop him in a week, but it's a guy that might be able to break out later on in your season. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. We're available on YouTube and all audio streaming platforms. We also do a live show every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. I will not be on that live show this Sunday, but Nick's going to hold down the fort. I'm taking all of your fantasy football questions, ensuring that you are ready for kickoff. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I'll be on West Coast time. So my football starts at 10 o'clock, but I'm on vacation. Football doesn't exist to me, which is great. All right, Nick, let's go to our all boom teams for Week 3. We're going to kick things off with the quarterback position. Nick, who is your all boom quarterback heading into Week 3?
I am going with a guy who's had a couple rough weeks to start the year, but I think the overall outlook for this offense, this team has been great. I am going with Jared Goff. The first couple weeks, like I mentioned, been rough, but it's time for a get-right game for these Lions. None of them have been fantasy dominant. None of those superstars you took at the top of your drafts have finished in the top 5 yet, even though all of them have gone top 3 or 5, including Laporta at 1. So I think that Jared Goff and this team gets it done this week. Highest over-under of the week, 52.5 points. The offensive line for the Lions has still been great, and the pass rush for the Cardinals is not great. They looked good last week, but the Rams were missing 4 offensive linemen from that game. So they're one of the only totally healthy offenses. That front offensive line is great. It's going up against a bad pass rush in a high over-under game. I like the matchup for Jared Goff. I think even though there's a lot of people with hesitancy because he's still outside the top 20, I think he's a good start. I think this matchup, this opportunity is good, and you're going to say that more weeks than not, but Arizona is not the best defense in the league. They did look good against the Rams, like I mentioned. A lot of injuries on that Rams offense, especially that offensive line. I think a very healthy Lions team is going to kind of humble the Cardinals a little bit. I like the Cardinals a lot, but they definitely need a little bit of humbling after that big week 2 performance.
I'm going with one of Nick guys, Cool Joe Burrow, who's had a rough start to the 2024 season, but he did finish within the top 10 last week, scoring 17.2 fantasy points against arguably the league's best defense at this point, Nick. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs seem to kind of pick off, where they left off last year. And then you can make a case that they are the best defense in the league. So Joey B looked good against them. He had that ridiculous fumble. That wasn't good. But aside from that, I mean, he really could have won the Bengals that game. The Bengals are 0-2. They have to come out hungry this week, and they have the perfect get-right opponent within the Commanders. The Washington Commanders have allowed quarterbacks in 2023 the second most fantasy points allowed, and then in 2024 they allowed the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So great opportunity for Joe Burrow. Great opportunity for the Bengals. Nick, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. For the sake of it, I'm taking any Bengal receiver next week as my boom player. So I had it listed here as Chase/T. Higgins. I think every Bengal receiver, should really boom next week. The Commanders, as bad as they are against quarterbacks, are just as bad against wide receivers here. They allowed the most fantasy points to wide receivers in 2024 and the second most in 2023. Basically, them and the Eagles are flip-flopping this year and last year. But great opportunity for the Bengals in a get-right game. If you're in a survivor pool, I think I'm going to take the Bengals this week. I think it's a good week to take the Bengals. As much as we love talking about the talent of Jaden Daniels, I think they've only scored two offensive touchdowns this season, I think. It took them the entire game to score one against the Giants. And the defense is terrible. It's one of the worst, if not the worst defense in the league. So great opportunity for all your Bengals players. Nick, I know we were doing this out of order, but we could just switch it to receivers here. So I just gave you my receivers. And if Higgins isn't playing, I would consider going with Yoshi Voss in a deeper league. There's a lot of injuries at the moment. If you need a flex play, I think a Bengals receiving option is a great play, for this game.
I'm going to go with a guy who has also struggled the first 2 weeks. I'm going with Brandon Ayuk. Listen, man, it's his time to shine. He just got the bag. He was begging for it. He was difficult. And it was because he said, I'm the young receiver. I don't get enough workload, but I still produce numbers. So now his workload should go up. Probably no Debo, definitely no CMC this week.
Yeah, Debo's out for a couple weeks for sure.
Yeah, and the Rams secondary got torched by Arizona last week. We just watched Marvin Harrison Jr., deep ball receiver, absolutely torch him. Well, guess what? That's Brandon Ayuk's game. He has absolutely no reason not to perform this week, deliver on his ADP. And listen, if he gets more workload, which he should be getting, Brandon Ayuk last year was averaging 4.5 catches per game with over 80 yards. So if he's going to get that number up to 6 or 7 this week in catches, that's a 100-yard receiving game, and you hope for the touchdown. So I think Ayuk has all the opportunity here to succeed. I think he's a very talented receiver, and I'm going to keep pushing my agenda with him because I think he is very, very underrated, and I think the offseason stuff screwed him over a little bit with the public perception. But listen, man, he's a talented receiver. Those numbers do not lie.
We're going to see how talented he really is facing off the number one corner and safety for the next few weeks. This is going to be a really good test for me and Nick's Ayuk debates. I don't think Ayuk is this star-studded number one option. I think he really benefits from having Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey on the team as well as George Kittle. So it'll be interesting to see how good he really is after the contract. My second receiver is a guy who should not be on any all-boom team for the rest of the season after today. I think this is the last time I'll definitely use him. That's going to be Marvin Harrison. A lot of people doubting him after week one, had a great week two. The wide receiver one on the week. He had close to 30 fantasy points. And now he goes right up against the Lions, who I've been picking against the entire season. I'm going to keep picking against. The Lions allowed the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers in 2023, and now have allowed the third most in 2024. Week one, they gave up about 25 points to Cooper Kupp. And then last week, obviously, Chris Godwin had close to 30 fantasy points. I think he was a top 5 receiver on the week as well. So keep picking against the Lions. Like the Lions, the Eagles, the Commanders. Like these are teams that we're just going to keep picking on every single week. And me and Nick are going to have to we do have an anonymous source that tells us if we're doubling up on players. So we'll never really have the same players. So we're going to have to fight for these teams every single week. But great matchup for Marvin Harrison. Like I said, should have another good game this week. The time to trade for him is over. You're not going to get him at a good value. And the time for him to be on the all-boom team, I'm kind of cheating this week, I feel like. But no more. He's going to be solid the rest of the season. So, alrighty, Nick, your second wide receiver.
I'm staying in that game. I'm going with Jameson Williams. I'm ready to go all in on him.
There you go.
Through 2 weeks, 20 targets, 200 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, doesn't really get much better than that for a guy you drafted late. I like stacking with my quarterback and going with Jared Goff like that.
Well, I did the same with the Bengals. I don't like stacking, but I did end up doing the same with the Bengals.
Yeah, and listen, the thing that about Jameson Williams that I liked from week 1 and I wanted to see if it was consistent with week 2, and it was, he got a ton of first reads from Jared Goff. That was not common last year at all. He was just an explosive deep threat. You hope that he caught the big touchdown that kind of saved the week, kind of like the Romeo Dobbs. But he's settling in better than that. We got to remember, this is a guy that the Lions used a first-round draft pick on. They were really high on him then. They're really high on him now. And like I mentioned earlier with Goff, this offensive line is going to hold up and have time to throw the ball. So in a high over-under game, he's in a perfect situation to go and get a big touchdown. And on top of that, he's getting the workload to go with it. If this stays consistent, Jameson Williams is the league-winning receiver. Like, there's no question about it. We've seen 2 receivers finish in the top 10 before. We've seen it from I believe we've seen it from Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and we've seen it from Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. There's no reason the Lions in a very explosive offense can't do the same exact thing. So I'm buying into Jameson Williams now. I think it's too late, like Nick mentioned, for Marvin Harrison to buy low on him, but I do think Jameson Williams is going to prove a lot of people wrong, and I want to see the bad week because I will be sending those trade offers. You better watch out if you're in my league and you own him.
There you go. All right, we're going to kick it to running backs. I'm going to kick it back to Nick so we can kind of stay in order. Who's your first running back boom for week 3?
I'm going with Mr. Breakaway Speed, Tony Pollard.
Uh-oh.
I think he's earned a must-start spot in lineups at this point through 2 games, 33 carries, 144 yards, and a touchdown. On top of that, he's got 10 targets, only 50 yards in the receiving game, but the targets and the PPR, that's the things that matter for fantasy. Tajay Spears now a little bit dinged up, might miss this week, and if that's the case, Tony Pollard's snap share goes up, and he's going up against the Green Bay Packers. Guess what they did in week 1? Allowed Saquon to be the running back 1 on the week with 3 touchdowns, and last week Jonathan Taylor 15.5 points. So Tony Pollard lining himself up for a big day in Green Bay.
I'm going with one of Nick's guys here, Devon Achane, and I kind of lead the charge on the anti-Achane train, but Achane has a great matchup this week. He's going up against my Seattle Seahawks, and I love it what McDonald's doing with the defense. I really do. I think it's really tough to go from legendary head coach to the next one, but I do like what the Seahawks have done. I've said that before, but the Seahawks position is still really weak at linebacker, and I'm going to keep picking on the Seahawks every single week when it comes to the running backs because that's going to be the struggle for the Seahawks defense. Achane's going up against a Seahawks team that just allowed 177 rushing yards on the ground to both Patriots backs combined, Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson alone had 90 yards on the ground with a touchdown. The Seahawks last year allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs. This year, they're not as high only because that week 1 match against Denver was so favorable, but I think it's going to level out, over the next 2 weeks. The Seahawks will be one of the worst rushing defenses within the NFL. On top of that, Dolphins look like they're starting Skylar Thompson. I just don't see Tyreek Hill and Waddle being productive. And Nick, I didn't put Waddle on my all bust team, but I'm pretty sure the numbers for Waddle without Tua are really, really bad. I don't know if you have him on your all bust team, but I'm sure he's going to end up there one of these weeks because the numbers are really bad. So I think the Dolphins will really have to lean on their run game and use HN as their real motor if they want to compete and win this football game. They're still a talented team. McDaniels, yes, is still really talented offensive mind. So the Dolphins still have the talent, they just don't have a really reliable quarterback, but they do have a reliable running back that when he's healthy has breakaway speed, can catch the ball, can basically play receiver. And that's a lot of things that those Seahawks linebackers just cannot cover and cannot compete with. Your second running back, what do you got?
I'm going with Justice Hill, a little bit deeper.
That's a very deep roster. I like it.
But he's going up against the Cowboys. And listen, the Cowboys might have sucked last week against the Saints, but the Cowboys under Mike McCarthy have been the best home team in the NFL. I don't think they're going to suck that much at home this week, hosting the Ravens. And when the Ravens are down in games, Justice Hill has been the favorable back. The last 2 weeks, week 1, they were behind, and Justice Hill had a 52% snap share. Last week, yes, they did lose to the Raiders. They were up 2 possessions, and Derrick Henry had a bigger snap share. But Justice Hill still found himself on the field for over half the snaps. He had over 50% snap share. Again, against the Chiefs, 8 targets. Last week, the game script, like I mentioned, not favorable for passing, but still found that workload. And take a look at what happened last week against the Cowboys in that running game and those pass catching. Alvin Kamara, RB1 on the week, 65 yards in the air and a touchdown. So them Cowboys, they are good at home. It's a high scoring projected game. It's a money line game. Can go either way, according to the books. I can't see the Ravens falling to 0-3, but I do feel like it's kind of a lot more things point in the Cowboys direction than the Ravens direction in this game. So if that's the case, Justice Hill is lined up for another game where you might have 5+ targets, 50% snap share, some work in the ground. And that's a formula for fantasy success. It's what you want to see from your running backs, your RB2s, guys that you can slide in for a spot start. And I think Justice Hill is in one of his best matchups that he's going to get on the year.
I'm going with a guy that I am out on this year and going to continue to be out on, but I think he has a great matchup this week, and that's Rachaad White. I know he is a little bit dinged up, so if by Friday comes around and he's out, slot and Bucky Irving, because whoever plays in this game is going to have a really good opportunity. I think it's going to be Rachaad White. While I was making my all boom team, I did search Twitter, and the report is they believe he's going to be good. It doesn't sound like he's going to miss time. So if Rachaad White is playing in this game, he's going to boom. He's not an efficient running back, but last year he did just reap the rewards of having a really easy schedule and getting the volume. He has the best matchup he's going to have the rest of the season probably. Denver Broncos allowed the most fantasy points to running backs in 2023. Week 1, they allowed K9 Kenneth Walker to score over 18 fantasy points. And I think the Bucs are going to be up in this game. The Broncos are one of the worst teams in the league. They just start looking at the draft lottery now, or not the lottery, the draft now at this point. They're one of only like 5 teams or 3 teams I could count on my hand where I'm like, they are bad. They're not going to win a lot of football games. Like that's just the reality of it. And the Bucs are very, very good. The Bucs, you could argue, are a top 3 or 2 team in the NFC right now. So they should go up big between Mike Evans and Godwin and Baker. And then, Rachaad White, if they go up big, that's more rushing opportunities to just kill that clock and to get their run game going, which hasn't gotten going yet this season. So good opportunity for Rachaad White. Good matchup. I would start him this week. Your tight end, who do you got?
So, Nick, I said I like doing the stack earlier. I'm not putting Laporta, but my original plan for a stack was Joe Burrow, who, like we said, we make sure our anonymous raw general managers, who I'm going to refer to him as from now on, our anonymous raw GM, make sure we don't not have the duplicates. And guess what? I like Shiesty, but you want to know who I like even more? Mike Gesicki. Like Nick mentioned, the Commanders' defense is atrocious. It's one of the easiest matchups for pretty much all the skill position players.
And quarterbacks, like any position,
and
really.
100%. It is the get right game. And the Bengals, they could use it. I mean, next week they go up against Carolina, another easy matchup. This game and must win because they really cannot afford. They really need to get back to 2-2, especially chasing the Steelers, who are favored in this game. But let's get on to fantasy. Mike Gesicki last week, 7 catches on 9 targets, 91 yards. In week 1, he had a touchdown called back. The NFL admitted this past week that the touchdown should have happened. It should not have been overturned. And he hit the most diabolical gritty I've ever seen. We've seen it from him before, but it looked absolutely zesty with Joe Shiesty. And listen, if that touchdown counted, he's the tight end 3 on the season, and we're saying he's a must start, but we're not really referring to him to that yet. So I'm saying, like I mentioned on the show, use your waiver priority on him. You might be too late if you just tuned into this one and not the Tuesday show, but Mike Gesicki's on your waiver wire. He is absolutely worth the start, not only in this matchup, but if he plays well in this matchup, he's going to be locked into fantasy lineups for the rest of the season over guys like Njoku who were hurt, Ferguson, Engram, all those guys that were injured that were kind of those fringe tight ends. Like he's going to earn and then lock that starting spot up above all of them. So I would rather be now and be a week too early than a week too late on it.
I'm going with Brock Bowers, and again, a guy that might not appear on this list again. That's a lot of these guys. They really shouldn't be on this list, but I may have taken a little bit of the easy way out.
To be honest,
it is a little bit of a cop out. Didn't really love a lot of the other tight end options this week, but he's tight end 2 on the season. He's facing those Carolina Panthers who allowed the second most points to tight ends in 2023. I'm sorry, this year, a 15.7 average. So another great matchup for Bowers. I'm wondering how matchup proof he is at this point, but I think this might be another guy that does not appear on this list, for the rest of the season. And the tight end position is very tricky this year. Laporta's not playing well. Mark Andrews not playing well. Kelsey, it's a very flux position, and it seems like Bowers might be here to stay, and those managers that got him really did get a steal. So, all right, your flex play.
I'm going with Amari Cooper.
That's a good flex play every week.
That is a great flex play. He's always in the flex for every team. But listen, like I said on Tuesday's show I forgot when I said it. I said it one of these days, but there was kind of balance in the force this week, right? The guys that were good in week 1 kind of came down to earth. The guys that were great or horrible in week 1 were great in week 2. Amari Cooper is the epitome of a balanced player. And what I mean by that is you're going to get 8 great games and 8 bad games from him this fantasy season, like you do every season. He started with 2 bad games. Time for the good one. And he gets the New York Giants this week, whose secondary is atrocious. Listen, he might only have 5 catches on the year and no touchdowns, but you know what? One note he does get? He gets a target share on that offense. 17 targets. He's due for a bounce back against a weaker secondary. I love the opportunity for him. I think he is a must start. And I know it's hard to say because, like I mentioned, 5 catches in 2 games, not fun. But this is a get-right spot. It's a get-right spot for a lot of teams. Like we said, Washington, Carolina, like those teams, the Giants are in that tier. And some of these better players, and Amari Cooper, he's a talented football player. He is due to get his, and this is the matchup to kind of do it in.
I have a guy here that really shouldn't be on this list, but I think the performance over the past 2 weeks has landed him on it, and that's Nick's guy, Garrett Wilson. Like a lot of fantasy managers that spent high draft capital on him in rounds 1 or 2, in the very early round 2, are concerned about him, are concerned about the offense, and rightfully so. I'm a Garrett Wilson owner in one of my leagues, but I think this is a really good get-right game. Facing the Patriots defense that allowed the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers so far in 2024. DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba just annihilated them. Both of them finishing in the top 10 last week. Both of them had, I think, 10 plus targets combined for over 250 yards, I believe, something crazy like that. The numbers are nuts last week. The Patriots defense is not as good as it always has been. I know Christian Gonzalez is somebody that people are high on, but we're going to see how legit he is. Going up against Aaron Rodgers, going up against Garrett Wilson. It's a Jets home opener. They're going to have some juice. The Jets fans that didn't get to see Aaron Rodgers play last year, not to really start the fire here, but a lot of Jet fans that were at that game are probably going to be at Thursday's game as well, hoping that Aaron Rodgers plays more than a snap. I think this is the game where the Jets really should put their foot down and say, we're better than what we have been these first 2 weeks. They should have crushed the Titans. They didn't. They should have competed a bit more with the Niners. They didn't. The Patriots are just not a good football team. I'll keep saying that. Do they play above their potential due to a coach that maybe is better than what we thought? Sure. But the Jets should really put their foot down here, and I think Garrett Wilson could have a Thursday night primetime showing, and I hope he does because he's got to turn it around.
Yeah.
All right, going to our all-bust team. Who is your all-bust quarterback for week 3?
I am going with Matthew Stafford. And like Nick said, some of these might be.
I don't think he's playable. I don't think he's rosterable.
I don't know if he's not rosterable, but
I don't think he's rosterable. I think there's probably close to 24 quarterbacks I'd rather have than Stafford right now for the next 4 weeks.
Wow. Okay.
Who's he throwing the ball to? I'll let you give your take.
Hey, listen. He's on the team. I'll put my hands up.
I know. No, I agree with you. I think it's a good one because I think after this week, I don't think he's going to be on our all bust teams. I think he's on our all drop team.
Probably. I will say this. I do feel like this was one of the toughest weeks to kind of bust quarterbacks because a lot of these guys did have those get-right games, like Nick mentioned. Joe Burrow, a fringe quarterback, gets Washington. You have Jared Goff, who I have, gets Arizona. Like a lot of those guys that would be on the all-boom team, all-bust team, like Jordan Love's hurt. You're clearly not playing him. Tua goes on the IR. Like all those guys that are in that range, they got the tough matchup. So We'll get into Stafford real quick. But he's not good for fantasy. Like Nick mentioned, who's he throwing the ball to? Only 1 passing touchdown through 2 weeks. Not great. And the main reason I was going to go with this, and I was kind of feeling this way before the injury, was San Francisco is a team he does not play well against. He has 245 passing yards per game, which is pretty high. That's because the game script calls for it. He only has 6 to 7 touchdown to interception ratio. Negative, not good. And without his 2 best weapons and 3 offensive linemen down in this game, it's not a good situation against one of the league's best defenses.
I'm worried for Stafford's health, honestly, because that's a get-right game for the entire 49ers. I also want to note here, just because I like bragging at times, I busted C.J. Stroud last week, and he was only the quarterback 14. So just want to note that one there.
I like
it. My bust quarterback is Trevor Lawrence, and we're not talking about Trevor Lawrence enough in terms of how bad he's been since we sat down for Thanksgiving dinner in 2023. He hasn't won a game since Thanksgiving. He is 0-7. And in that 7-game span, has thrown for 52 yards. I'll take my phone out. Some quick math here. 1652 divided by 7, we're looking at about 236 passing yards per game, which isn't bad, but 10 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. That's an average of 1 interception a game. Now he's going up against the Bills defense, who allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks in 2023. It's tough to give 2024 numbers when a lot of these teams have only played 2 games. But at the same time, I think the Bills defense is better than people are giving them credit for, even though they lost a ton of pieces. They really just held the Dolphins down in check last week, even before the Tua concussion, which I think happened in third quarter, late third quarter, early fourth. It was later on in the game. The Dolphins were not moving the ball both on the ground and in the air. So I think it's bad all around for the Jaguars. I don't know what's going to happen with that team at the end of the season, but they just paid Trevor, and they're just not winning or really competing in these football games. So anyway, all bust, Trevor Lawrence.
Like it. So heading to the running back position, I am going with Aaron Jones. Week 1 did look pretty good for him, better than I would have thought, but week 2 did not look great. Ty Chandler had more carries and was more efficient. He had 10 carries for 82 yards. You had Aaron Jones with 9 carries for 32 yards. That is horrible. That is Alexander Madison-esque there. So Ty Chandler just looked like the better back. He also got a higher snap share. He missed some time. Aaron Jones did miss some time to injury, so Chandler's usage could go up in this game, especially because he did show that when he was out on that field, he was more efficient. And on top of that, if Aaron Jones does get the rub and does really get those first and second down reps like he usually does, it's still against the Texans, who are a tough defense. This past week, only allowed 14 carries for 18 yards to DeAndre Swift, who was on my all-bust team. And then you have Jonathan Taylor, who in week 1 had 16 rushing attempts for 48 yards, a touchdown save the week. But like we all mentioned with Anthony Richardson, no targets there to the running back. So the formula was not great for them then. It's not great in this matchup. And Ty Chandler has looked like the better, more efficient running back. So I would rather put my trust in the younger guy, which is why I think he is kind of worth a waiver wire ad if he's still out there, because he could overtake on a Vikings offense, which is proven to be really good against tough defenses. But Aaron Jones just has not been great on the football field, and his fantasy numbers have been a little bit deceptive because of it.
My first running back here is going to be Kyren Williams, who's going up against the 49ers. And the last time I put Kyren Williams on the all-bust team, he did bust, only scoring 14.6 fantasy points, saving his day with a touchdown. Those aren't the numbers that you expect from a guy you drafted in the early second round. Now he's going up against that 49ers defense that allowed the 5th fewest points to running backs in 2023. Nick already mentioned how banged up the Rams are. 3 offensive linemen out, 2 receivers out. What that says to me is they could try to run that offense through Kyren, but if I'm the 49ers DC, I'm just going to blast Kyren. I'm just going to throw an engage 8 at him, not let him get yards, make Stafford try to beat us and just hit Stafford. So I think it's going to be a really, really tough game for Kyren, kind of like week 2, where they just got blown out and then there just wasn't much for Kyren to do. Again, a touchdown also saved his day in week 2. So if Kyren's not getting a touchdown, I think he could really fall, out of the top 30. And running back such a thin position, it's tough to even say who could you play over him. But if you drafted heavy on running back, I think he's benchable at this point. It is a get-right game for the 49ers as well. Drop that game to the Vikings. This is a get-right game for the 49ers, I think. So
yeah.
Totally. Your second running back.
Najee Harris, a guy that I've kind of been all over.
Najee's on one of these teams every week, and I bet he's going to be on one of these teams every single week for the rest of the season.
That's true. He's one of those fringe running backs where you drafted him, where he could be an RB2. He could be outside the top 24. So the matchup is rough. We'll keep it at that. The Chargers, great against running backs so far. And there's no PPR upside with Justin Fields, who looks like he's getting another start. Undefeated with 1 touchdown as an offense. That's a truly incredible thing to see. But there's been only 1 catch per game so far for Najee. He just doesn't check down like Russell Wilson, that check down king, who I was hoping was the starter for Najee's season, but just not the case. And listen, he's getting a ton of workload in that offense. He's getting like 40 carries per game, which, if you ask Artie Smith, it's like, why didn't you do that with Bijan Robinson last year? But they're doing it for Najee. He's getting the workload. He's just not translating to fantasy numbers. He is truly a touchdown or bust guy, but this game has the lowest over-under of the week at 35.5. So the books are telling you it is not a touchdown game for a lot of these guys. And the Steelers offense, like I just mentioned, 1 touchdown in 2 games. That is not fantasy success for your running back.
Like I pick on the Lions, for allowing points to the receivers, I'm now going to back the Lions, and I have been backing the Lions for 3 straight weeks. The Lions last year allowed the the fewest points to running backs. Too many notes here. The Lions allowed the fewest points to running backs in 2023, and through 2024, they allowed the second fewest points to running backs, going up against Rashad White and Kyron Williams. James Conner is facing them this week. I think the Cardinals offense could be productive, but this is going to be a rough one for James Conner. I think they could abandon the run. I think it could be the Kyler and Marv show and McBride as well. I think the run could get abandoned here. I think Conner gets, stuffed. Aiden Hutchinson's having a monster season already. 5.5 sacks through 2 games. At that point, he's on pace to set the all-time record for most sacks in a season, win Defensive Player of the Year. So, bad matchup for James Conner. Good matchup for the other Cardinals. And that's my old bust for running backs. Your first receiver. What do you have?
Nick mentioned him earlier. He said he didn't have him on the all bust team, but I do. Jalen Waddle. Listen, it's time for him.
I'm glad I thought about it. I did not send this name over to our anonymous GM. I do know your other wide receiver. A good pick on Waddle because I want to hear the numbers because I know they're bad without Tua. I don't know the numbers. I know that Nick knows the numbers.
So Waddle with Skylar Thompson as a starter. He averages 4 catches for 55 yards and 0 touched. And he has a total of 0 touchdowns with him. 4 for 55 is not horrible for a guy that you pick up off the waivers this week, but Jalen Waddle was not drafted to be that. He was drafted to be a top 24 receiver, and there is no way he is hitting that number with Skylar Thompson as quarterback. And one of the other things, the Seattle Seahawks have been really solid against the receivers. Granted, they have not played a good one because they've been going up against the Broncos. And who's the other
Patriots?
Patriots. Yeah, so they have not played a good one, and Miami might have definitely has the best receiving core that they're going to play this year. But they got to fly from Miami to Seattle. That is not fun. That's a 7-hour flight. Nick, I don't know. Have you ever done it? I know you're down in Florida. You haven't done the flight.
No, I've done New York to Seattle, so I haven't done the diagonal shift. But yeah, different weather too. Much different weather.
So I actually looked at the forecast. It can change. It's 63 degrees, and then I realized Tua is not playing, and 63 for Tua is 32 for us New Yorkers. But like I mentioned, the stats are not good. It was funny when Nick was saying that. I was like, I have the stats. I want to say it later. And the 4 for 55 with no total touchdowns, that 4 for 55 is inflated because he did have one very good game, one 100-yard game, but the stats just are not good. It's less than 4 catches a game. So Jalen Waddle, he's going to sit on that bench for a little while, and he better keep it warm because Tua is not coming back until, I believe the report was at a minimum week 8.
Yeah, because he's on the IR for 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. So
I think it's 4, and then they have the bye.
They have the bye, yeah.
Yeah, yep. It lines up horribly.
Yep. My first one is George Pickens, and I think Pickens is very, very talented. This team might score the lowest amount of points in the season this year. Carolina is going to be right there with them, but the Steelers have scored 15 and 13. They've only had 1 offensive touchdown on the year. The yardage numbers are not good. And now they're facing a Chargers defense that's allowing the second fewest points to wide receivers. Harbaugh's getting that defense to play above their potential. It's just a recipe for disaster. Why would you not take away Pickens at this point?
Yeah.
I see nothing good for George Pickens and the Steelers right now, especially in this matchup. I know they're 2-0, but week 1 doesn't really count, and week 2 is the Broncos, and they don't really count either. I know my Seahawks beat them, but that's the reality of it. So, bad match for Pickens. I could see Pickens appearing on the all-bust team a lot this year, and I could see him going on the boom team a bit too, but I think it's going to be very
third
tough.
Straight week on the all-bust team, just so you know. And we've been right for 2 weeks. We both had him week 1. I had him week 2, and Nick's going with him week 3. So we are both all out on T. Higgins in this situation and these
Pickens, not T. Higgins.
That's what I meant. Yeah, Pickens.
Is T. Higgins your next bust?
No. I did not go with.
I don't know where you pulled T. Higgins from. Maybe you're too jacked up about your Bengals on Monday night.
Yeah, I'm a little juiced,
Little juiced. All right. You guys are second wide receiver. That's not.
I imagine this is the one, Mike Evans. Patrick Surtain has been absolutely clamps this year. We just mentioned Pickens' name. He was just shut down last week. And then you look at DK Metcalf, wide receiver 2 on the week last week. But awful in week 1 against Patrick Surtain. Patrick, I hate to say it, Surtain probably is the best shadow corner in the NFL. I think Sauce is a better overall corner, but Patrick Surtain is a true shadow. He is going to follow that wide receiver one across the field the entire game, and that is Mike Evans. The one place he does not really go is into the slot, which is where Godwin plays. So Godwin belongs on an all-boom team. I didn't put him there because it's hard to say the wide receiver one on the season belongs on an all-boom team. But listen, man, I'm probably busting a lot of people against Patrick Surtain every week, and he's the second best corner in football. We're going to avoid that shadow matchup, no matter who it is. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to bench your Jay Jettas against him, but Mike Evans with Baker Mayfield, who, yes, is playing above who he really is, needs to come down a little bit. And Mike Evans, the touchdown threat and that touchdown upside, a little bit lower with Patrick Surtain.
All right. So my second wide receiver is a guy who, again, I think is going to appear on these teams a lot. Malik Neighbors really broke out last week, but against the Commanders. Much tougher matchup this week going up against those Cleveland Browns, who are the second toughest team against wide receivers in 2023, allowing the second fewest points on average. And the offense is terrible. Like, Daniel Jones is terrible. There's not much good around the Giants organization. This is a bad matchup going from good Browns defense, bad Giants offense. So in these type of matchups, like as talented as Neighbors is, I'm concerned the opportunity just won't be there because of how good that Browns defense is. That front seven is legit, and the Giants O-line is not. So that's going to be really tough for him to have opportunities. If I'm the Browns, why am I not doubling Neighbors? I'll let Wan'Dale Robinson try to beat me. So your tight end, who do you have?
I'm going with Dallas Goedert. He's one of those fringe guys, but he's gotten a lot of starts, and he's kind of, I don't know if he's in the top 10, but he's been scoring enough to probably be like 3 points outside of it if he's not, because the tight end position has not been great this year. But Demario Davis is one of the best cover linebackers in football. The Saints have been on absolute fire. The Eagles get the short week. And like we said, we love that elite offense, and I'm still probably going to play him because there's always that touchdown upside with this team. But this situation is going to be ground and pound with Hurts and Barkley. I mean, that's the best opportunity that they're going to have. And on top of that, as much as I love Goddard, it's just not a lot of red zone targets for him. They have just been going Hurts, Barkley the entire time. They don't pass when they're close to the red zone unless, 3rd and 3, a run to get a first down kind of seals the game, and they pass their, all-pro running back, which was disappointing if you're an Eagles fan, hysterical if you're not an Eagles fan. But they don't look towards Goddard in the red zone. They're not looking for that touchdown upside with him. And as much as I think that he presents it, because I think the Eagles will have the top 5 points per game by the end of the year, and that usually leads to tight end success, this just is not a great matchup against Demario Davis.
I think that Mark Andrews might be the biggest bust tight end of the year by the end of the year. Wow. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned. Going up against the Cowboys, they allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to tight ends in 2023. He hasn't yet to crack double digits. The Raiders should have been the matchup to do it. He didn't. Zay Flowers is just gobbling up targets, and Lamar's still running the Lamar show. I know the Chiefs doubled him, but this is another bad matchup. He doesn't look healthy. He's not, all of it looks bad right now. And I'm waiting for the breakout game so I could say that I was wrong and be happy that he's on my team in our league. But I don't think you can bench him because of how much draft capital you spent on him, but I just wouldn't be surprised if he puts up another stinker below 10 fantasy points, and that's just not what you drafted within rounds 3 to 5 at that draft capital for a tight end. But he's not the only tight end that's doing it. Kelsey's not doing it. Laporta's not doing it. Kyle Pitts didn't have a great game on Monday night, so the tight end position is really struggling this year, kind of outside of Brock Bowers. And McBride is playing okay, but aside from those two, tight ends are really, really struggling, and I think they'll struggle to continue, at least for Mark Andrews. Mm-hmm. Your flex, to cap it off, who do you got?
I'm going with Drake London. Trent McDuffie, and I've talked a lot about cornerback matchups for Mike Evans. Trent McDuffie has been on fire. We didn't know if he was going to step up to it because it's been L'Jarius Sneed guarding the one last year. But McDuffie has stepped up to that, and he shut down Chase last week, who was on Nick's all-bust team. Zay Flowers, who was on Nick's bust team 2 weeks ago. So maybe I stole him from him. But Drake London, short week against an elite defense. Steve Spagnuolo has been great. This is a horrible matchup for them. And the fact is, the Chiefs' front seven is also electric. Like Nick mentioned earlier, this is probably the best defense in football. And the Falcons' offensive line, it's not very good. It didn't look great in week 1. Week 2, it looked a little bit better, but they benched Jalen Carter for some off-the-field issues. So listen, Drake London, he had that game-saving touchdown, that emotional win. I think we get a real comeback down to earth moment. I think that there was a real shot that Atlanta Falcons team would have been 0-3 opening up the season, but if they didn't get saved by that Barkley missed reception.
They're probably a better team than the Steelers, though. I think the 1-1 is fine.
The Arthur Smith thing did not help. Arthur Smith knowing the personnel and being the coach of the Steelers. Definitely week 1, not great, but regardless.
So my flex bus is any Chiefs running back. I don't care if it's Kareem Hunt. I don't care if it's was it Carson Steele? Steele, I think. I don't care. I don't care. I don't want to play any of them. Falcons allowed the 4th fewest points to running backs in 2023. So far through 2024, they allowed the 6th fewest points to running backs. I don't know who the bell cow would be, if there will be a bell cow. I think it's really a committee situation. And even down the goal line, they love doing nonsense. They love doing little pitches. They love doing the Kelsey shuffle. You can't even get, like, even last week, I think Pacheco could have had a goal line opportunity and he didn't. And they gave it they threw the offensive lineman on the 1-inch line. So I don't think any of these Chiefs running backs are playable this week. Maybe assess the situation next week and look at the snap shares, look at who looks good. But I wouldn't trust any of them this week because you're really, really desperate in a 16-man or 14-man league and you lost Pacheco. Maybe you have to, but if you have another option, I would go with the other option. So before we get out of here, me and Nick are each going to give you one player who is on the waiver wire that we think could break out maybe this week or next week or in the future, but like a deep, deep sleeper that you might want to stash before next week's waiver wire. So, Nick, I'll let you go first.
I am going with wide receiver for the Cowboys, Jalen Tolbert. Last week, he led the Cowboys in targets, snaps, routes run, and the reports from training camp this offseason were great and super positive for him going into his sophomore season. The Cowboys offense is electric at home. We talked about some of the stats earlier, but listen, they're clearly going to need another piece in this offense for them to keep clicking. And with him getting that much of a snap share and that much of a target share in this offense, frankly, in a game where they were trailing from behind, that's a good option. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the highest over-unders on the week with the Ravens. This is a very good matchup for him to be a spot start. The Ravens allowed a ton of points to Rashee Rice in week 1, a lot of points to Xavier Worthy in week 1, a lot of points to Devontae Adams and to Brock Bowers. So the Ravens have shown that they're going to allow 2 fantasy options to get big games. So that presents a great opportunity for Jalen Tolbert as a spot start, maybe a DFS play this week for a guy that's owned in less than 3% of fantasy leagues right now.
I'm going with Bucky Irving. I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I spoke about him on our Sunday morning show, and kind of like this is the guy for this segment that I wanted to envision it behind. He's owned in less than 30% of fantasy leagues as of right now. Again, recording Tuesday night. We'll see what happens after the waiver wire. Might be owned in more than 30% in your leagues, but if he's still not owned, I would go pick him up. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry at the moment. Rachaad White is only averaging 2 yards per carry. Rachaad White is not an efficient running back. He fails every single metric or like next gen stat basically, and the only reason why he was very productive last year was because there was nobody to compete with him, and he was really the bell cow. And we've seen this before with running backs, where running back had a really solid season because he was the bell cow, because he had the production. Then he's overdrafted the next year, and then he gets overtaken by somebody else who's more talented. Bucky Irving's a more talented running back, according to the coaches. He's a very hard worker, shows up first, leaves last. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Bucky Irvin's backfield by the end of the year. And I don't know if it's going to happen this week or the week after, but I think he's a guy that you're going to want on your roster, because by the time week 8 or 9 hits, I think it's going to be his backfield. So although he's not owned in the percentage of leagues I would like for this segment specifically, if he is not owned in your league, you need to go pick him up now and just hold him. Just hold him on your bench. Promise you, he's better than that one flex guy you're never going to play.
Sure.
All right, that is our show, episode 17. If any other fantasy questions, if your players were not on the all boom or all bust team and you have questions about them, go to the live show Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Nick's going to be running the live show. I'll be on vacation, but normally I am on that show. But I know Nick's going to do a great job answering all of your fantasy football questions. This is the first time watching us and you enjoyed the show, thank you so much for that. Make sure to drop a like on this video on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications every single time we go live. If you're listening on an audio streaming platform like iTunes or Spotify, please subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating and a review. Make sure you're following us on social media. Instagram is PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast and Twitter is PrimeTime FF Pod. Thanks again for your support. Nick will talk to you guys on Sunday, and best of luck in your week 3 matchups.